The City of Toronto released its budget moving forward in 2024, and one of the common words along that budget were tax, 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 and tax. In fact, there are 4 new taxes coming into play when it comes to real estate in the City of Toronto. I'm Mike Ouzas, I'm a realtor here in Toronto, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on these new taxes and if you think they will help when it comes to either A, housing affordability, or B, helping to manage that budget for the City of Toronto. If you ever want to book in a call to discuss your plans when it comes to Toronto real estate, you can click on that first link in the description down below. There are 4 new tax headlines for the City of Toronto, and each of them have different implications on whether you're a buyer, a seller, or even a tenant. The 4 tax proposed are a vacancy tax going from 1% to 3%, the new luxury tax, which came in on January the 1st on properties over $3 million, an increased property tax of 10.5%, and even a new foreign buyer tax. We'll go through one by one to give you the insights on each of these 4 and discuss what exactly that means for you. The first tax we'll discuss is Toronto's municipal land transfer tax over $3 million, aka the new luxury tax. This has already come into effect this year on January 1st, 2024. The original thresholds were up to $55,000, 0.5%, $55,000 and 1 penny to $250,000, 1%, $250,000 to $400,000, 1.5%, $400,000 to $2 million, 2%, and over $2 million, 2.5%. Now, the new municipal land transfer tax rate for the City of Toronto, $3 million to $4 million, 3.5%, $4 million to $5 million, 4.5%, $5 million to $10 million, 5.5%, $10 million to $20 million, 6.5%, and now over $20 million, 7.5% municipal land transfer tax. One thing to note for the City of Toronto is there is a double land transfer tax. You pay both the provincial and the municipal land transfer tax when you're purchasing a property. These new rates when it comes to municipal land transfer taxes definitely add to the higher cost from the affordability factor if you're a buyer looking to get into the market. I do understand that these taxes come in at $3 million, and maybe not all buyers are at the $3 million mark, but I would caution your thoughts on if in 10 to 20 years, most of the properties now that we're seeing at the $1.5 to $2 million mark eventually become $3 million plus. Now we're going to start to see this tax applied across the board for more and more properties in the City of Toronto. This is something that we saw as the land transfer tax rebate, which was a great incentive for first-time buyers, came into play. Well, that rebate kind of caps out in and around that $400,000 mark. Anything above that $400,000 mark, first-time home buyers will need to start contributing to the land transfer tax portion because the rebate is actually not enough to cover the full land transfer tax in the City of Toronto, which of course is double. Back 10, 15 years ago, that land transfer tax rebate was a good sign of relief when it comes to a first-time buyer getting into the market because that's an extra cost that they didn't have to apply at closing. So that's something to consider, is that these land transfer taxes eventually will start to apply to more and more people as the years go by. Next on the list, Toronto City Council votes to hike Toronto's vacant home tax to 3% as the housing crisis grows. And this was voted in on a 21-2 favor. If we take a look down on what exactly was brought in the first year, $54 million during the first year. Here's the kicker though, is that only 2,160 homes were declared vacant as of August 1st. However, the city ultimately deemed a total of 17,400 properties vacant, meaning the owners had to pay the tax. Now, what happens in that scenario is if you do not file whether or not your property was vacant in the City of Toronto, and even if you own a property and you've been living there, you still need to file this tax. And if you're a landlord, make sure to file your rental property that somebody has been living in the property for 6 months or more for 2023. And this has to be done by the end of February. So this is your reminder to get it done before the end of February, because if you do not declare by the end of February, they will consider your home vacant and charge you the tax. And now it's going up from 1% to 3%. So the last piece here is that the city is still working its way through a backlog of thousands of homeowners appealing being assessed for the tax. Said the cost to administer the vacant home tax was approximately $11 million a year, cuts into the effectiveness of the levy. Next up, the city of Toronto is trying to clamp down even more on foreign home buyers. Now, guess what? We have had a foreign buyer ban since the start of 2023, and it's still continuing into 2024. And we don't know if that's going to continue in 2025 and beyond. This foreign buyer ban was done by the government of Canada, not the city of Toronto. Even though the city is trying to implement a higher foreign buyer tax when it comes to foreign buyers, of course, this tax may not be as applicable as it may seem. If you are looking to purchase a property in the city of Toronto and you are not under permanent resident status, however, you do qualify for any of the exemptions, which there are many when it comes to the foreign buyer ban, that's where this tax would come into place. And again, they're proposing these kind of taxes will bring in about $15 million in revenue in 2025. And this is going to be called the Municipal Non-Resident Speculation Tax, set at 10%, going into effect in 2025. And that's if it gets the green light on February the 6th. And they're hoping that this tax will free up Toronto real estate for residents by deterring foreign home purchases. The thinking is that this will help put a lid on price growth, at least to some degree. I don't think this is really going to bring in as much money as they're anticipating for the city of Toronto, which they project at $14 to $15 million. They also mentioned that if the foreign buyer ban continues into 2025, that number will come down under the $10 million marks. Next up, we have the proposed property tax increase of 10.5%. And this actually affects homeowners, home buyers, and tenants all in different ways. I do understand that Toronto has one of the lowest tax rates in the entire province. However, something to keep in mind is that there is a double land transfer tax payable, and one of those is a municipal land transfer tax, which was already discussed here in this video. Instead of getting higher taxes year after year, Toronto front loads a good portion of that tax. And I actually think it could be a smart idea from the city's perspective, because if somebody doesn't stay in their home for 10 or 20 years and makes a move 3 to 5 years, they will be front loading a portion of that tax in the purchase price right away on closing. Here's the proposal: 10.5% property tax hike, part of the 2024 budget. They even mentioned it could increase as high as 16.5% if Ottawa doesn't provide more shelter funding. And this mentions that according to city staff, the property tax increase would cost the average household another $26.75 a month, or about $321 annually, and generate $380 million in additional revenue this year. The city building levy would cost another $4.42 monthly, or about $53 a year. The breakdown for that 10.5% is a 9% hike to the city's property tax, as well as a 1.5% increase to the city building levy. What do all these taxes mean if you're a buyer, a seller, or even a tenant? Well, if you're a buyer, there are a few factors here, and most notably, number one, the land transfer tax. If you are looking to purchase over that $3 million mark, there will be a significant increase in your closing costs when it comes to purchasing that property. If the increase does happen, how will that affect you on the buy side? Also, if you're a buyer, as housing prices continue to grow over the next 10 to 20 years, this $3 million land transfer tax may come into play for everybody across the board. If you're an owner or possibly a seller, there are a couple tax implications here that are relevant to you. Most notably, the vacant tax is super important to declare on whether or not your property has been vacant, and you must get that declaration by the end of February. Even if you've been living there, or even if you have a tenant in your rental property, this must be done on your part as a property owner. And of course, if you do own and your property taxes are increased by 10.5%, that is a big cost that comes out month over month. As the years go by and those property taxes continue to increase, you'll be feeling these every single month when it comes to your property tax bill. If you're a tenant, why would a property tax increase matter to you, especially if you're not the one paying the property tax? Well, 10.5% increase could qualify under the above rental increase guideline. And if you're currently renting a property older than November 15, 2018, and the rent control is set at 2.5% for 2024, this rental increase guideline could play a factor here moving forward, and I'll show you why. Just to mention, I'm not a paralegal, and this is taken directly from the Tribunals Ontario website under the Landlord and Tenant Board. If you take a look at the rent above increase guideline, there is a section here about municipal taxes. In this example, 2.2 as we know in 2024, that's 2.5%, and times it by half. 2.5% divided by 2 is 1.25. If you add the 1.25% to 2.5%, that is 3.75%. If the increase in taxes is greater than 3.75% for 2024, it is considered extraordinary. And the breakdown is an increase in municipal taxes and charges considered extraordinary if it is greater than the guideline plus 50% of the guideline. And if you go down further in this document, it says there's no limit on the percentage rent increase above the guideline allowed for extraordinary increase in the cost for municipal taxes and charges. I'm not a paralegal, and this is something that I just found on their website, so I'm not super well versed in this. And if you do have any more insight, drop a comment down below. And if you are a landlord or a tenant looking to get more information when it comes to rent increases above the guideline, definitely seek the help of a paralegal so that you can get the proper advice. That's it for taxes, and that's a lot of information, but drop a comment down below on what you think is going to happen for the city of Toronto as we move along into the future. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.